China has become one of the most remarkable economies in the modern world. Over the last 2 years, the internet has gone wild, looking over the astonishing development that this country has achieved. Unbeatable infrastructure, AI robots that looks unreal, and cities that look like something from the year 2100. It's really surprising for a country because it went from being a poverty-suffering state to an industrial superpower in just a single generation. Over 800 million Chinese climbed out of extreme poverty during this boom, an achievement no other country has come close to. Even emerging nations from India to Vietnam to Nigeria all hope to copy China's success. And America? Well, it's trying desperately to keep its position as the biggest economy in the world, but it seems like they're about to be defeated pretty soon. The stakes are enormous. Billions of people seek the same ladder out of poverty that China climbed. But what if that ladder's gone? What if China's economic miracle was a one-time event that is never to be repeated again? And America will never grow like China is. To understand this, we need to look at the unique formula that powered China's rise. Cheap labor, deep globalization, open Western markets, and powerful supply chain networks all came together to drive China's historic rise. But by the 2000s, that model has started to weaken. No country today, not even large economies like India or fast-growing exporters like Vietnam, can fully repeat what China achieved because the global environment has changed too much. To understand why, we need to go back to where it began. In 1980, China was one of the poorest countries in the world. GDP per person was under $200, far behind much of Latin America and the Asian tigers. The country was still recovering from decades of turmoil and was largely isolated from global trade. Over the next 40 years, however, China transformed itself into the world's second largest economy and the manufacturing center of the planet. By the 2000s, income per person had risen above $12,000, more than 60 times higher than in 1980. For decades, the economy grew at an average rate close to 10% per year. Hundreds of millions of people moved from rural villages to fast-growing cities. By 2021, China accounted for about 15% of global exports, up from less than 2% in 1990. After joining the World Trade Organization in 2001, China's trade surged dramatically. Goods trade jumped from about $500 billion in 2001 to more than $4 trillion by 2017. Factories multiplied, exports soared, and China became known as the world's workshop. By 2023, China was producing roughly 1/3 of global manufacturing output, more than the United States, Japan, and Germany combined. From clothing and toys to smartphones and computers, products around the world carried the label "Made in China." This industrial boom lifted nearly 800 million people out of extreme poverty. It accounted for the majority of global poverty reduction during that period. For millions of families, China's growth meant steady jobs, rising incomes, and better living conditions. It was exactly the kind of transformation many developing nations hoped to copy. Countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America tried to follow the same export-led path. The idea seemed simple: attract factories, sell goods to rich countries, and grow quickly. But the ladder China climbed may now be harder to use. China's rise was not based on a single factor. It was built on several powerful conditions coming together at the right time. The first pillar was demographics. During the 1980s and 1990s, China had a massive and expanding workforce. The working age population grew from around 600 million to nearly 1 billion people over a few decades. That meant hundreds of millions of young workers were ready to take factory jobs just as the country opened to global markets. Wages were very low in the beginning, making China extremely competitive. At the same time, literacy rates were relatively strong, and basic education allowed workers to learn quickly. China combined huge scale with a labor force that could adapt. The second pillar was timing. China's rise happened during the peak of hyperglobalization. After the Cold War, trade barriers fell, and multinational companies searched for low-cost production locations. Western consumers wanted cheaper goods, and businesses were willing to shift factories overseas. When China joined the WTO in 2001, it gained broad access to major consumer markets with lower tariffs. Exports grew at extraordinary rates in the early 2000s. Retail chains in the United States and Europe filled shelves with affordable Chinese products. Demand seemed almost unlimited. The third pillar was policy and infrastructure. Chinese leaders made a clear decision to focus on manufacturing and exports. They created special economic zones like Shenzhen, offering tax breaks and simpler regulations to attract foreign investors. At the same time, the government invested heavily in roads, ports, power plants, and railways. Today, China operates some of the busiest container ports in the world. This infrastructure allowed goods to move smoothly from factories to global markets. Unlike many developing countries that struggled with power shortages or weak logistics, China provided reliability and scale. Another key factor was supply chain clustering. As industries grew, entire networks of suppliers formed within the country. In regions like the Pearl River Delta, companies could find component makers, packaging suppliers, and assembly plants all located close together. This reduced costs and sped up production. Over time, China controlled supply chains from start to finish. Once this ecosystem was built, it became very difficult for other countries to compete. However, these conditions have changed. Around the mid-2000s, major shifts began. The era of endless cheap labor started to fade as the population aged and birth rates fell. Wages rose quickly, improving living standards but reducing China's low-cost advantage. At the same time, globalization slowed. Political attitudes in the United States and Europe shifted toward protectionism. In 2018, the US imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese goods. Governments began focusing on reshoring key industries like semiconductors and reducing dependence on Chinese supply chains. Technology also reshaped manufacturing. Automation and robotics reduced the need for large numbers of low-wage workers. Industrial robots became cheaper and more efficient. Companies could now produce goods with far fewer employees. When machines replace workers, the benefit of cheap labor in developing countries becomes less important. Economists warn that many nations today face premature deindustrialization, where manufacturing jobs peak before countries become rich. This helps explain why other countries have struggled to copy China's success. Mexico, for example, benefits from proximity to the United States and free trade agreements. Manufacturing expanded, but productivity gains did not spread evenly across the economy. Many workers remain in low-wage services or informal jobs. India launched the Make in India campaign in 2014 to boost manufacturing. Yet the sector's share of GDP has remained around 15%. Infrastructure challenges, regulatory complexity, and global competition have slowed progress. Even China itself now faces new challenges. Growth has slowed, the population is aging, and geopolitical tensions are limiting access to advanced technologies. Moving from middle income to high income status requires innovation and higher productivity, not just factory output. Global supply chains are diversifying under strategies like China Plus One, but no single country is replacing China. Vietnam has grown rapidly in electronics assembly. Bangladesh is strong in garments. Mexico is gaining from nearshoring. Yet each captures only part of the production network. None matches China's scale, infrastructure depth, and integrated supplier base. Instead of one dominant manufacturing hub, production is spreading across multiple countries. The development path today looks more complicated than it did in the 1990s. Manufacturing alone may not create enough jobs to lift millions out of poverty the way it once did. Automation limits job growth, and global markets are less open. Developing countries may need a more balanced strategy that combines manufacturing with services, technology, and domestic demand. Investing in education, technical skills, and innovation becomes critical. Cheap labor by itself is no longer enough. Some countries are building technology parks, expanding vocational training, and encouraging research and development. Others are strengthening regional trade to reduce reliance on distant markets. Large domestic markets, like India's, may help drive growth through internal consumption. Governments may also need stronger social policies to support workers during economic transitions. The world of the 2020s is very different from the world China entered in 2001. The ladder to rapid industrialization is not as simple or as stable as it once was, but development is still possible. It may require slower progress, smarter policies, and greater flexibility. Instead of one giant export boom, countries may need a mix of manufacturing, services, and innovation. The path is tougher and more complex, but with the right strategy and long-term investment in people, and infrastructure, growth and prosperity can still be achieved. Let me know your thoughts in the comment below and make sure to subscribe for our next interesting video coming soon. This is Rob, and you are watching Beyond Economy.